Change is tricky. It's one of those things that we often need for progress, but at the same time, too much too fast brings with it a high probability of ending up right where you started, especially when it comes to our health. If only there were a simple yet high upside intervention to improve our cellular and metabolic situation without needing an entire change management team to organize our life. I think you know where this is going. Yo! What is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Today, we are once again diving into one of our favorite topics, structured meal timing, and exploring some new data highlighting how it might help fight off one of the growing and most prevalent diseases that we modern intelligent walking apes face: type 2 diabetes, the literal essence of cellular and metabolic dysfunction, a condition where key tissue types like the liver's hepatocytes and skeletal muscles myocytes become desensitized to the energy regulating hormone insulin, a hormone which acts as a key to open the cellular doors for glucose uptake. And this dysfunction, along with suboptimal eating, leads to chronically elevated levels of serum glucose in the blood, which triggers a downstream flurry of inflammation-inducing systemically damaging effects over time, to the point where it's even hypothesized to be one of the accelerators of many of the other diseases of metabolic syndrome. Yeah, we're talking cardiovascular disease, hypertension, obesity, cancer, and all of their nefarious friends. So yeah, not very cool for biological school, and something we'd like to avoid if possible. However, for a laundry list of lifestyle reasons, this seems to be a difficult task, as over 100 million adults in the United States battle this condition or are considered pre-diabetic, meaning they have the onset of the disease. And when we zoom out, over 500 million people across the globe have been diagnosed, which is inching toward around 10% of the population, which is wild, but not nearly as wild as the topic of change. Yeah, you like that segue? And why it's funny? In a temperament testing way, of course. Because I think we've all come to the realization at one point or another that although fulfilling, it could be freaking hard. And this may be one of the reasons why. When it comes to implementing and carrying out successful change, an interesting pattern tends to appear. A pattern that becomes more pronounced with the size and quantity of the change attempted. And here it is. With each additional change an individual introduces, the likelihood of sustainability and success take a nice easy step off a figurative cliff, meaning the more attempted changes incorporated into a single iteration, the harder it is to stick with and find long-term success, and oftentimes leaving an individual in the same spot they started, but now with the weight of failure and self-doubt on their shoulders. We've all been there. Not a good feeling. Just think about how many times you've battled with different diets or workout programs throughout your life. This shit is hard, especially after you watch some rah-rah YouTube, which gets you to attempt both at the same time. This is the very reason we always preach the slow and sustainable strategy here, with the constant reminder that although it is difficult to be a little further looking in this world of instant gratification, health and longevity is a long-term, big picture game. And it's the daily micro habits and routines implemented in a sustainable way which get you there. Now, at this point, I bet you're wondering, how the hell does all this have to do with structured meal timing and diabetes? Excellent question. Because when we look at the options to take a simple yet effective first step, in my eyes, structured meal timing is up there on the list. No crazy or extreme changes to what one eats, just simply assessing and structuring a daily feeding window, which condenses all energy consumption into a predefined period, ideally 12 hours or less. And by doing this, research has shown a beneficial cellular and metabolic response, which also includes a glucose stabilizing, insulin sensitizing, fat mobilizing, effect. Effects which we cover all throughout the 60 plus videos on the Fasting 101 playlist, where we also highlight the latest protocols that I've been testing out. You can check it up here or down below if interested. And although there are a laundry list of different protocols to deploy, each with unique use cases and potential efficacy, at its most basic level, a time-restricted feeding protocol which follows a 12-hour or less feeding window and positions it during the waking hours of the day seems to move the health needle for people who are starting at a point of impaired health. But you know how we do it here. We always turn to good, solid data to back up any claims. So let's take a gander at this new study highlighting time-restricted feeding and intermittent fasting's impact on people with type 2 diabetes. Researchers out of China's Sub-Health Intervention Technology Laboratory sought to see how brief periods of intermittent fasting and caloric restriction impacted remission outcomes in adults currently battling type 2 diabetes. To do this, they recruited 72 adults aged 18 to 75, all diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and taking at least one diabetic medication. They randomized half of them to a control group eating ad libitum, or whatever they want whenever they want, and the other half to an intermittent fasting regimen, consuming around 850 calories between the hours of 6:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. for 5 consecutive days. Following these 5 days, they had 10 consecutive days of ad libitum whenever and whatever eating. And over the course of the 90-day trial, this intervention cycle was completed 6 times. Now, as you can see, this was a combo of intermittent fasted, time-restricted feeding, and caloric restriction for 5 days at a time, making it more of a unique protocol compared to the standard time-restricted feeding regimens. Just an important note to keep in mind. And as previously stated, the primary outcome for this trial was diabetes remission, defined as a stable hemoglobin A1C under 6.5% for at least 3 months without taking any diabetic medications. So what happened? Well, a bunch of stuff. At the end of the 3-month trial, 47% of the fasting group, nearly half of them, achieved diabetes remission compared to 3% in the control group, with the fasting group showing significantly lower hemoglobin A1C, fasting blood glucose, and weight reduction when compared to the controls. And get this, after that 3-month point, 50% of the fasting group had stopped using their diabetic medications, and nearly 70% reduced their medication dose compared to 3% who reduced it in the control group. Damn. Okay. Now, one of the coolest parts of this study came at the 12-month follow-up. At this snapshot in time, 9 months after the trial ended, nearly 45% of the fasting group was still in diabetes remission compared to no one in the control group. That's right, zero, zilch, nada. This group was able to maintain a hemoglobin A1C and fasting blood glucose in the remission range. However, it was slightly higher than at the 3-month point, suggesting that, like with any other habit, you need to keep doing it to maximize the desired outcomes.
Of course.
And to add some perspective, 65% of the participants who achieved diabetes remission were dealing with the condition for more than 6 years. Pretty crazy. In the end, researchers concluded, our research shows an intermittent fasting, Chinese medical nutrition therapy, can lead to remission in people with type 2 diabetes. And these findings can have a major impact on the over 537 million adults worldwide who suffer from the disease. Now, as always, just like with any study we review here, we must call out that there were a number of limitations which deemed the need for additional research to tease out the true cause of the outcomes. As mentioned, this was a combo of both weekly intermittent fasting and daily time-restricted feeding, and there was a modest calorie restriction during those intermittent fasting weeks. So, there are a number of potential modulators at play here, which begs the question, is a change to time-restricted feeding worth a go in real life? In my eyes, all of this is super interesting and promising for a number of different reasons. First, it reiterates that remission from one of the most prevalent diseases on the planet is possible, and possible in people who have been battling it for up to a decade. Second, it shows that a natural, non-pharmacological therapy is a potential means to achieve it. Yeah, pretty damn cool. Now, does this confirm that intermittent fasting is the secret to diabetes remission? No, not at all. As I stated a bunch of times now, the protocol used in this trial was a combination of weekly intermittent fasting, daily time-restricted feeding, and 5-day periods of caloric restriction every few weeks, driving an ultimate reduction in weight loss and biomarkers which track type 2 diabetes. This study simply does not provide clear evidence in what was actually driving to the remission, but it does whittle it down to show some solid longer-term efficacy for meal timing protocols, which is pretty promising if you ask me. And bringing this full circle and applying it to our conversation around change, if an individual were looking for a solid place to start, a place that doesn't consist of crazy dietary reform and total lifestyle upheaval, structured meal timing may be a very simple and effective first step, while also not forgetting the fact that true health and longevity comes from a holistic shift in lifestyle habits, a shift which encompasses eating real whole nutrient-dense foods, consistent high-quality sleep and circadian alignment, daily movement, and a healthier environment, including more nature. But we also gotta be real. Going from 0 to 100 all at once just isn't a strategy for success. Thus, a slow and methodical approach, sustainably adding habits over time, is a much better and easier to follow recipe for long-term vitality. And by simply incorporating some daily structure into your eating, aiming to consume your energy in 12, 10, or 8-hour windows each day, is a pretty simple and doable first step with a lot of cellular and metabolic upside and very little downside, worth a noodle on. And as always, you want to talk these strategies over with your medical professional before embarking on any radical changes. And if you want more content on the topic, you can find many more fasting and protocol research reviews, as well as many other longevity-focused topics on how to optimize your pretty cool meat suit all across the channel. Listen, as we've learned and continue to reiterate each and every week, being a passive observer when it comes to your health is a tried, true, and tested method to lose your health. So be that rebel and start owning it. One little step at a time, of course. Future you is waiting.